The Black Dress by Timothy Banfield. Read by Timothy Banfield. Day 1. I had just gotten off work and was hating myself for letting Anne walk by without saying anything to her again. An all too familiar loathing permeated the air around me. The walk up to my front door was always silent and cold, but never as dreary as inside. Once inside my home, the loneliness of the empty space sunk back in. I took a deep breath, letting the cold, stagnant air fill my lungs, and placed my shoulder bag and keys back in their usual places. A half table by the door, with marks and scratches, signifying the spots on its surface where my belongings always rested. I always found myself eating the same box meals while watching the same TV shows. The hours passed by as they always did, and then it was time for bed. I never could understand why I bought a king-sized bed, because, despite all the space available to me, I always slept on the same left side of the mattress. There was a section of the bed that I, nor anyone else, had ever been, and a pillow that had never been used. I set my alarm and fell straight to sleep. I mean, why wouldn't I? I had no thoughts to keep me up, nor anything to look forward to. Day 2. It was 7:30 in the morning. I woke up just as my alarm went off. I never hit the snooze, and I never dreamt. I just showered, dressed, ate, and left. I was always on time, like a well-oiled machine. 9.5 hours later, I stepped through the door of my house and placed my pocket items in their resting spot without even looking. But strangely, as I was about to sit down, I felt a chill all over my body, a feeling as if something wasn't right. I looked around and saw nothing out of place. I rolled my shoulders, shaking off the feeling, and then sat down. The shows I watched were mediocre at best, but had the ability to take me out of my head for a few hours. Once again, I finished my meal, showered, brushed my teeth, and slid into bed. Within seconds, I was asleep, and 8 hours later, I was awake. Day 3. Today, Anne wasn't at work, so the self-hatred for saying nothing to get her to notice me didn't follow me back home. I placed the key in the door and grabbed the knob. I only made 2 steps inside when a cold chill rushed through me and out the door. My house felt like an icebox, but I couldn't see my breath. I quickly closed the door and ran to the thermostat. 77? Not the kind of temperature that I would consider freezing, but not hot either. To compensate, I set the system to 85 and closed the box. Afterward, I returned to the door and placed my keys and bag where they belonged. I had only been in my place for a few minutes and already felt not at home. It felt colder and drearier than usual, but nothing was changed or out of place. I stood for a moment to see if anything spoke out to me as far as why I felt the way I did, but no ideas came to mind. After I pondered this uneasiness, I went on with my boring routine. I placed a TV dinner in the microwave and sat in the same TV-watching position as before. That day, the episodes were reruns, but I watched them just the same. The show was almost over when I had the notion that there was someone watching me through the window. For a brief second, as I turned, I thought I saw a face right up against the glass before quickly moving away. I jumped up and ran to the window to see if there was anyone there, but saw nothing. The night was calm and dark, with no movement of the trees or bushes. After taking a good look over the entire yard, I closed the curtains and sat back down on my couch. My shows were over, I showered, and I was off to bed. Day 4. I was awakened by my alarm clock, but as I leaned over to see it, I saw that the time was 9:02. I leaped out of my covers in a panic and ran to the bathroom to quickly brush my teeth. There was no time for a shower. I was already late. I then ran to the closet, but for a moment, I forgot what I would normally wear. So I grabbed the first thing I could find and threw it on as I stumbled down the stairs. I was almost out the door when I looked at my cell phone and saw that today was Sunday. My panic was needless. I didn't need to go to work. I held my phone to my forehead and laughed as I slid down the door with my back against it. As I sat there, I started to wonder, what could have happened? How did I forget what day it was? How could I have slept through my alarm for an hour and a half? Why did my own closet seem strange to me? I must have sat there for at least 5 minutes thinking about what had happened before I realized how much my neck itched. It felt like I had a bad mosquito bite. I got up from the floor and made my way back upstairs. Once in my bathroom, I looked into the mirror. My throat was red, from my left ear to my Adam's apple. There were no marks that I could see, but it was clearly inflamed. I grabbed some ibuprofen for the swelling, and then went to the tub to run myself a nice hot relaxing shower, hoping that would be enough to soothe the itch. After getting out, I felt better, but I was still tired. In fact, I spent more time in the shower than usual, just standing there staring at the drain. After getting dressed, I made myself a big breakfast and watched some TV. Later, I went to the store and bought some dinners as well as a louder alarm clock. I finished out my day with laundry and an interesting book before bed. It was a self-help book from my mother for people who suffered from depression. I set my new alarm and fell right to sleep. Day 5. The following morning was normal, no mistakes and no confusion. I was halfway through my shift before I started to feel ill. I tried to just play it off, but the way I looked, everyone could tell, including Anne, who actually came up to me and asked if I needed to go home. For some strange reason, her making eye contact with me was what pushed me over the edge. I excused myself and asked my boss if I could leave, and I drove to the hospital. I waited for hours in pain before I was finally able to see the doctor. I was told that it was most likely the flu and that I should just stay home for the rest of the week. Before heading home, I called work to tell them what the doctor said. Anne was the one to take the call. I told her what the doctor recommended, and she assured me that she would tell the boss. Before hanging up, she told me to get well and feel better soon. I think that day was the most we had ever talked. I returned home with a full day ahead of me and no idea what to do. My body was cold and my head was aching. I searched the TV for hours, but nothing interested me. I mean, since I was normally at work, I hardly knew what would be on during the day. I eventually turned the television off and started reading the self-help book again. I was a few chapters in and lost in thought when another chill ran through me. This time, it felt as if it came from the window behind me. As I turned to look over my shoulder, I saw the curtains moving with a slight sway, which I knew was impossible because the window was closed. I dropped the book as I looked out past the curtains and into the yard. I couldn't quite make out what I was seeing, but what I believe I saw was a woman in a black dress standing 30 feet from the window, looking into the house. As the curtains swung between me and the glass, I lost sight of her for a moment. But then, just as they moved out of my way, she was gone. I ran out of my house to where I thought I saw her and looked around, but saw no sign that anyone was ever there. Afterward, the night was calm and not a sound could be heard. I gazed out into the street for several more minutes before I went back inside. I then locked the doors and windows before finishing up my evening. As soon as I was upstairs, I scanned the yard one more time through my bedroom window before showering and going to bed. I set my alarm as I always did, even though I wasn't expected at work the following day. I slept for a few hours before being woken up by the sound of scratching and rustling in the bedroom. I looked around the room to see what was making that racket, but saw nothing. I waited patiently for a while to see if I could make out the source of all the commotion. But after a few moments of listening intently, all was silent. I stayed quiet for another 10 minutes in bed, making sure nothing was in the house, before laying my head back down on the pillow and drifting back to sleep.